This is Duke University.
Well, I thought I would just say a word or two about the origins of the center, not more than a moment or two, but I thought you might be interested. I hadn't really reflected on it very much until this kind invitation from Gil. I did my graduate work at Duke with a man called Joe Spengler in the economics department, but I also did some work with a political scientist whose name was Taylor Cole, who in 1961 was appointed provost. I graduated from Duke in '58 and went back to Canada where I came from, and then in 1962 I had this invitation to replace my old mentor Joe Spengler in his courses, but also to work with Taylor Cole, who was sort of overwhelmed as provost. He had not had any administrative experience, and he was a very distinguished political scientist, and I think felt sort of torn by his new role. So I worked with Taylor for, I guess, about 5 years and enjoyed it enormously. He was a wonderful man. But he used to say to me, we need this or we need that. Duke was at a time, really it was in a very bad state in 1962. There had just been an abortive coup d'etat when the provost tried to take over the institution, and as a result, he was fired by the trustees, and the president at that time resigned. So a new medical surgeon came in as president, Darrell Hart, and Taylor was the provost. So we were kind of reconsidering how Duke could be brought from what it then was, which was like a sort of a large Davidson college, mainly a liberal arts college with a few professional schools attached. And one of the things he told me right off was, we need a Center for International Studies. And he said, I'm not quite sure what they do, but there isn't one in the South, and so we should have one. So he said, go find out. So I went and visited most of the existing centers, particularly Harvard, Princeton, Chicago, Indiana, which had a big one at that time. And I came back and proposed that we set this thing up. And he said, you got to go find money for it. So I went and visited all the major foundations and found that it was quite an attractive possibility to come to the South, the benighted South, where there was no Center for International Studies. And so we created this, I guess, about 64. I might be off a year or two. And I was the director of it, in addition to helping Taylor with all his million other problems. And one of the things that amused me at the time was that it was perceived by many people on campus as a power move. We were going to try to steal their money and their projects. And so many of there wasn't much international activity. There was some in the law school, some in the medical school, and they all objected to having a Center for International Studies. But we brought them together and persuaded them that this was to be a supportive mechanism, not a power grab. The last thing in the world we wanted was more power. And we set up something called the Committee on International Studies, COIS. It probably doesn't exist anymore, does it? No. But it was made up of all these representatives from these different projects around the campus, and it was all coordinated, and I think was pretty active in my time. My departure occurred when we had a chemist appointed as provost, and he would say to me, why does anything have to be different if it's international? He said, we have chemistry here and we have chemistry in England. There's no international chemistry, so why do you have to have this? So facing this resistance, I figured it was time to depart.